Welcome back to another episode of Profitable Publishing. Today we're going to be talking about the 3 things you actually need to focus on in order to achieve your author goals. And today's episode will be a little different than what you might expect because typically as an author, you might be focused on page reads or books sold, and those are important and we'll talk about those. But there are 3 areas that really should define your goals when it comes to your book. I'm Ashley. I'm a 5-time author, book marketing strategist, and self-publishing consultant who supports coaches, consultants, speakers, and service providers to be able to package up your expertise into a profitable book that builds your brand. And so I'm excited about today's episode because this really does introduce something that many authors overlook and or can feel really overwhelmed about. So maybe you have really been focusing on how many books you've sold. Maybe you are focusing on how many pages have been read if your book is in Kindle Unlimited. Or maybe you're someone who thinks, okay, I need to publish as many books as possible because that's the way to sell my books. And I'm here to tell you that those things are important depending upon your goals. But really, at the end of the day, there are really 3 things that you should be focused on. And they should be the determining factors in everything you do on your author journey. And this is relevant whether you are an author for self-help, for business books, for personal development. These are going to be the things that should be the driving forces, because at the end of the day, if these things aren't happening, then you probably are not selling books. You probably are not getting those page reads, and it all ties back to that. All right, so the first thing is that your goal is to get people to actually read your book. Now, I know you might be thinking, well, duh, clearly that's the goal. And it is the goal. However, most people don't actually read the books that they buy or the books that they're given. And there's actually a Japanese concept of stacking books or collecting books with the intention of basically just hoarding them, but not in a way that is where you are just being materialistic, but just like, okay, I have this group of books, I'm collecting them, I really appreciate books. That's kind of the sentiment. And I don't speak Japanese, so forgive me if I butcher this, but it's called sundoku. So I think it's kind of like Sudoku, but sundoku. And whether or not you're Japanese, that's something that people do. We know that when we look at folks' background in their videos, or just things that you might see, those Pinterest perfect bookshelves that are either color coded, or maybe they got a rainbow situation going on. People love to collect books. People love to get books. People don't always take the time and energy to actually read the book. And so your first goal is to get readers to read your book. And so I'm going to give you a couple things to actually make that happen. And if you're new here, for context, I have a background in literacy. And so I've taught students who either love to read, were reluctant readers, whatever the case may be. But if I can convince children to read a book, I can convince your readers to read your book. And so that's kind of the frame of reference I have from there. And then on my journey as being an author and a coach to other authors, I've used that to develop these structures and these processes. For some people, buying a book or having a book or claiming that they've read a book, it can be a status symbol for some folks. Oh yeah, I've read that book, or oh yeah, that's on my list of things to read. It's a connection point, and that's great. But at the end of the day, if your goal is to get somebody to read your book, to consume your book so that they can eventually sign up for some type of product or service, or so that they can leave you a review, which we'll talk about in a bit, then you need them to actually read the book. And so that is something that can be done by doing a couple different things. And of course, if you are someone who is selling your book on multiple different platforms, you might not always have the ability to connect with that reader in terms of knowing who they are. Specifically, if you sell on Amazon, you will not know who your reader is unless you've included a couple different items, which you can do. But generally you're not going to know who that reader is. Or maybe somebody gifted the book to someone and they might not know you personally, which is great because that means they're recommending it. But I say all that to say, you want to do certain things inside of your book so that it is going to be something that people can't put down. You want to create raving fans. And that's actually something I talk about in episode 7 of how to really find those people so that way you can create something that they love. So definitely take a listen to that if you haven't already. And I'll link that in the show notes. But with your book, one of the ways that you can get them to actually read the book is really in the way in which it's formatted and laid out. And so with that, making sure that your design is structured in a way that people are excited to read it, in a way that they have visual breaks so that it's not just a ton of text, that their eyes are not getting a natural break within the text. And one thing I like to do is insert quotes or insert lists throughout my book at points where it makes sense, because as a reader, you have to have some time to kind of have like a mental break, and our minds tend to wander anyway. So why not allow that reader to have the freedom and like the permission to actually be able to do that? One thing else to consider is to think about additional formats of your book. Now, of course, we know that things such as an audiobook may or may not be an option for you depending upon your budget or depending upon how much you've generated in pre-orders. That might not be an option right away out the gate, but that is one format that makes things a lot more accessible to people. I know for myself, I am a mom of 2 little kids, and so outside of this, I work outside of this, and I cannot tell you for a large period of time, I cannot tell you the last time I had physically read a book, like sat down and read it, because I just did not have the time. And so I was definitely all about audiobooks. And I still love audiobooks now, but now that my kids are getting a little older, I can get back to actually like physically cracking a book. Or what I would do previously is I would listen to the audiobook version of a book. And then if it was something that I was like, oh, I need to be able to like annotate, write in this, then I'm going to go ahead and get the physical copy. And then that way I can listen to it and write in it at the same time or while I'm listening. And that's actually something that helps from a literacy standpoint, to be able to listen and also read it at the same time. It actually increases the likelihood of someone's going to remember it because it taps into multiple parts of your brain. So just a little bit of reading neuroscience, it helps you to be able to remember it better. And so having multiple formats makes your book more accessible, not just for people who are busy, but also people who have exceptionalities, people who are neurodivergent, people who have different things that they are working with. And so that's always a great thing. And even if it's just offering the ebook version in addition to the physical copy, if it makes sense for your book, because in some cases it might not make the most sense to offer an ebook for that, but really thinking about, okay, typically people offer the Kindle version. Could I offer the PDF version on my website so that way people have it where they could print it out? That's kind of your personal preference. Some people are not comfortable with that, but offering different formats is a great way to make your book more likely for someone to read it. And so just to give a little story about this, I actually met someone at an online summit that I was a speaker at last month, and she joined my Facebook group. I reached out to her to ask her a question because there was something missing on her questionnaire for the Facebook group. And then we were just kind of talking. She shared details about her book, and then I recommended my book, Profitable Publishing with Pre-Orders, to her because she mentioned that she wanted to do her pre-order for the fall. And so I sent her the link for it, and she was like, oh, do you have the ebook version of this? Because I would love to be able to get that. And then also I would love to be able to support you directly on your website. And I said, okay, yes, perfect. Say less. Here's the link. And she bought it within like 5 minutes of me sending it over. And so that's just another way to show that when people have options, they are going to be more inclined to actually jump on them. So providing options outside of just those larger platforms is helpful. And then other considerations you want to think about when deciding if your book is something that people are going to enjoy reading or love to read is to really think about your publishing process. So was your book professionally edited? And this can be something where I've seen authors say, oh, well, I don't think my book needs to be edited, or I don't have the funds to have it edited. And I direct them to my pre-order profit system because it helps you to be able to generate income before your book is out to cover these types of costs, because editing can be quite expensive. However, it's worth it. Your book in its entirety is the inside and the cover. So if you are not getting it edited, then you do run the risk of having something that is not going to look professional, that's not going to look polished, and also that is going to make people question if you are cutting corners in other areas. If you're a service provider, if somebody is reading something that you've created and it's full of errors, they might think, I don't know if I want to hire this person to provide this service. I don't know if I want to pay them 4, 5, 6 figures, whatever the case may be, for this service, for this contract, if when I'm reading their work, there are errors that are here that could have been prevented. And so just being very mindful that it's important to have your work professionally edited. And when I say professionally edited, I don't mean by a friend or family member that can edit it, a professional editor, because there are different types of editing that need to occur outside of just someone checking for like spelling, grammar, punctuation, things like that. And then, is the book professionally designed? Is it something where the formatting is done in a professional way? Does it look like it could compete against other books that are traditionally published or other books that are self-published but very professional? Are there errors that are there? Now, give or take, there is a certain margin where you're going to have a potential set of errors. However, that shouldn't be the norm in your book. And then an additional way to really make sure that your readers read your book is that you are including certain things that I like to call touch points. And I actually talk about these in episode 10. And so if you need a deeper dive in that, go ahead and check that out. But this is from my Captivate framework, where I support authors to outline their book. And so Captivate's an acronym. And so the T, the first T is touch points. And so including certain things inside of your book to be able to kind of, I was going to say virtually, but kind of tap your reader on the shoulder and say, hey, like, okay, if you've been dozing off, if you've been kind of spacing out, come back to me. This is something that you need to complete. It's not a passive experience. It's something that you actively need to do. And when you have those, it makes it so that people are able to kind of self-assess if it's a quiz or a checklist or something of that sort, or like an audit, something that gives them a little bit of additional support so that they can know that they're on the right track. This is a great way for them to self-check and say, okay, am I ready for this next step for the next chapters? Or do I need to go back and reread a section? And you can customize it to what your book is about, of course, but having some type of additional support within your book is key, because then people feel supported even when they're not necessarily working with you side by side. And so if this is something that you want to include in your book in terms of developing those touch points, making sure yours is professionally edited, professionally formatted, so that it really just looks like a beautiful work of art, then I encourage you to get more information about the Profitable Publishing Partner Service. And so this is where I work with authors to project manage their publishing while also producing it for them. So that way they can focus on running their businesses and building their brands. And so this is the space to be able to have those items done for you while also learning the ropes at the same time. So if that's something you're interested in, then you can visit profitableselfpublishing.com/partner. Now we are wrapping up the first one, which was to get people to actually read your book. And the second one is to get people to recommend your book. Now, this is where the sweet spot really happens, because if somebody is going to recommend your book, then that means your book is starting to market itself. And there's a quote that I love by Rob Fitzpatrick. He's the author of Write Useful Books. And so the quote is, "The goal of book marketing is to stop needing to do it." And so I'm going to say that again. The goal of book marketing is to stop needing to do it. If you've gotten to a certain point in your book marketing, your book is going to start to be something where people will recommend it for you. Meaning that you, of course, can still do your marketing. However, you are at the point where you have created such a following for this book. People's lives have been changed. They've gotten the transformations, and now they want to go tell people about it. And so this is something that I've had happen with multiple books, and it all boils down to making sure you make it something that is easy to read and actually incorporate some of the things that I'm going to mention in just a sec about recommending it. And so overall, your book should leave a lasting impact, regardless of the topic, regardless of the genre. Your goal is to leave an impression on your reader, because when you do that, then that means that they're going to want a few things. They're going to want to know, is there another book? They're going to want to know, how can I work with you? And then they're also going to want to make sure that they're doing it right. So whatever the framework or structure that you've provided inside of your book, they're going to want to make sure that they're following it, because if it's set up properly, then they know, okay, if I do this and this, with of course some caveats, with some adjustments, nothing is guaranteed, but if I do these things, there's a good chance that I'm going to get this result, or I'm going to get a result for my client. And so things to consider in order to get your book to be something that is a self-recommendation, meaning that people are recommending it for you, or it recommends itself to other folks, is that did you leave them hanging, or did you actually give them the process to complete whatever your framework is? Now, this is kind of a hot topic in business books, where some books will give you A to Z of an entire process. They'll give you step by step, 1 to 100, and those are books that are very comprehensive, but those can be ones where it might be difficult to bring somebody over to you to then have you to purchase some type of system or some type of process or some type of service tied to that book. However, the opposite is to have books that you are using as an introduction to the reader of your framework and your system. You're giving examples, you're giving ideas, you're giving case studies to them to let them know, like, hey, this is an option. This is something you can do. And it's more so working as like something that opens up their minds without giving them an entire step-by-step process. There's benefits to both types of books. However, regardless of which one you choose, you want to make sure that your reader isn't going to feel like, oh, they wrote this book just because they want me to buy the next thing, and there's nothing that I can take away from this. And so keep that in mind. Is this something that you are using with existing clients to support them inside of existing programs? Is it something you're using to attract clients so that they get a better feel of who you are and how you operate? Is it something you're using to be able to qualify clients before they get on a call with you or before they check out your packages, so that they can kind of get to know you by being able to hear you in their head from reading a book with you? You really want to get crystal clear about what your purpose of your book is, because then that's going to affect who is going to recommend your book. And then this also ties into like your marketing and your messaging. And so being very aware of your book's intention, of your book's goals, and the promise that you have for the reader. You don't want to promise like all of these things and then those are not actually included in your book, because then people will start to get angry, they'll feel cheated, they'll ask for refunds. And so you really want to be honest with your person. And so really, really spend time to think about that. And then one way to do this is to really think about using beta readers, which I recommend. I've mentioned them multiple episodes on this show, including last week's episode. And so this is where you have people who will give you feedback on your book before it's done. And these people should be aligned with you. They should be your target audience, and they should be a good fit for the typical reader that you might have. And so working with them can be helpful, because then that way you know that they're going to be representative of your reader. They will help you to know what readers might expect. And then also they'll help you to clarify things in terms of making sure that there's an alignment and understanding of what it is that you're trying to convey. Your developmental editor will help with this too. However, it's much different when you're working with just one developmental editor versus maybe you have dozens, or some people have hundreds of beta readers. I don't typically recommend that, but you want to have that option, because then that way you get to choose. Like, okay, the editor mentioned this, but really my readers are feeling this, so maybe I want to go with what my readers say, or I want to go with what my editor says. It really just depends on your book, your genre, and then also what the actual topic is. Another thing you want to consider to make sure it's something that people will recommend is this a part of your overall ecosystem? So if someone were to read this book, and if the book is guiding them into your other services, your other products, things of that sort, does this feel like a natural fit? Or is this something that's completely out of left field and they're going to feel like, well, I read this book, but then I came to your site and you're doing totally different things and I don't really know what to do next. Now, there is a way to do this. However, I typically recommend separating those items. So I'm an author from multiple genres, and so I do keep those separate in terms of when recommending things. However, I will refer to my food business inside of my author items, because I have books under my food brand, and so it's a good fit, because then I can demonstrate, hey, these strategies work not just with business books or not just with author books, they work with other books. And then same thing, I have clients who are in self-help, professional development, personal development. Even I have children's book author clients, thriller and suspense clients. And so there's a way to use those depending upon what your actual topic is. However, you want it to be where your book is a natural part of your overall ecosystem. So that way, when people get to it, they're not left confused. They're not left wondering, why is this here? Is this even the same person? Because that can be something that deters them from working with you, because it might seem like, oh, you do 50 million things, 11 things. And for some people, they don't like that. Now, if your people do, if your people are the ones who are like, you don't need a niche, then okay, have at it. But typically people are coming to you for your expertise in that one thing. And so be mindful of that as you are developing your book. And so one other thing I like to share, this is actually from my brother. He's an author as well. He got me into the author space. And so one thing that he shared before, and I don't think he's the originator of this, but he has shared this, that would someone be proud to be reading your book on an airplane? And so thinking about when people are on an airplane, people see your stuff as they walk by, the person next to you might say something or might ask you questions. Would your book be something that someone would happily recommend to somebody sitting next to them, whether they asked or whether they didn't? And then also thinking about, would someone who serves the audience that your book is addressing be excited to add your book to their curriculum? So for example, if you are someone who is looking to work with colleges or different organizations, would they be excited to include it in their grab bags? Would they be excited to include it in their curriculum for their students, for college campuses, or a coach that's adjacent to what it is that you do? So for example, one of my editors, she recommends my book, Profitable Publishing with Pre-Orders, to other authors after they finish their editing. And she also refers them to me because she understands I've sent people to her and she sees the finished product of what they've done. And she also edited that book for me. And so she understands the process, the framework. She had to read it a bunch of times as she was editing it. And so she knows, like, okay, this is a good fit book for this. So it's just a natural recommendation because she's aware of what's in the book. And so that also aligns with my ecosystem because the type of authors that she recommends are also authors that I would typically work. So it doesn't feel random, it feels very aligned. And your book should help your reader to achieve a transformation or a goal. There should be something that they are trying to reach or obtain, and that your book is going to support them to do that. Now, that doesn't mean that it has to be from start to finish, that they're doing everything under the sun. And in all honesty, you should avoid that because then it can be very overwhelming for a reader. So picking one transformation for them to do, and whether it is something that is introductory or something that's like, okay, this is start to finish, this is your manual, this is your Bible to do this, then that's fine too. And so to share an example, but Kendra Pecci, she was featured on episode 4, and she used my book, Profitable Publishing with Pre-Orders, to be able to generate $4,000 in pre-order income in 4 weeks. And so she actually recommended my book to another author coach. And so she was also her author coach. And so her name is Marketing by Shelby on social media. And Shelby had Kendra on her podcast. And so they were talking about her results because Kendra's in Shelby's program as well. And Kendra mentioned that she came to my pre-order profits challenge. She won a copy of my book. And then she was sharing the different strategies that she used from the book. And then that ended up resulting in Shelby reaching out to me to be able to have me as a guest on her summit. And I've followed Shelby for years, love her work. She focuses on social media marketing for authors, and she's got a pretty massive following. And so it was an honor for me to be able to speak there because like I said, I've followed her work. And so as someone who is my reader, Kendra recommended me to Shelby. And so your readers can do the same for you. They can speak for you in places where you are not. They can let people know, hey, the person who wrote this book is wonderful. Like, I've read their stuff. I follow them on social media. They've helped me. I've been in their DMs, things like that. And they can be your, not only raving fans, but they can be your speaker boxes when you are not physically there. Or even if you are physically there, they can share those things too. And so that's just so important. And then just to kind of wrap that up, as a result of being at that summit, I was able to get almost 100 people on my email list who are good fits, who are aligned, and then a few people reached out as well for services. So essentially, you want your book to be kind of like the gateway to kind of edge yourself into the hearts and minds of new folks who might not have seen you before, or who possibly are already raving fans, but maybe they need to see you in a different light or a deeper light. Okay, so that was talking about recommending your book. And then our last one is reviewing your book. Now, we know for authors, this is huge to make sure you get those reviews. It's something that can feel like you're pulling teeth if you're not sure how to get it done efficiently and effectively. And this is something I work with clients on to increase their reviews. But when it comes to designing a book that is set up to be reviewed, you also want to make sure that you are creating opportunities for them to have positive points in your book, to have things to say when they get to that review part. I know there have been times where I've gotten a review and it was just like a line or two, and it was not something that was super specific. It was not something that was going to really help the next person to really understand if the book was for them. And when you have a book that really evokes an emotion in people and really helps them feel like, oh wow, like I'm ready to take over the world in a good way, not a bad way. I'm ready to take over the world. I'm ready to like dominate this industry. Then they are more likely to share it. And so I'm somebody who leaves reviews on things anyway, just because I just think that's a nice thing to do, but everybody's not like that. And so moving past the frustration of, oh, this many people bought books, but only this many people left reviews. On average, I would say anywhere between like 5 and 10% of people might leave a review based upon what I've seen from my own books and authors I've worked with. And also consider that your reviews on Amazon might be slightly different than your reviews on Goodreads. I tend to find that the Goodreads reviews are a little lower than the Amazon reviews, and so just be mindful of that. As well, when you're thinking about reviews and you're listening to people's reviews, you really want to, first of all, you want to read your reviews. I know that's kind of a faux pas in the author industry from traditional publishing, but I believe in reading my reviews, and I'm going to tell you why. If you're not reading your reviews, then that means you're not getting that feedback from from readers. And then also you're blocking out potential things that could create additional streams of income and or additional products and services. So a couple years ago, I got a 1-star review from someone who was frustrated that my Daniel Fast devotional was not a cookbook. And to me, I'm thinking, okay, well, clearly it's not a cookbook because it says it's a journal, it's a devotional, and this is not a cookbook. Like, there is food on it because of the Daniel fast, but it's not a cookbook. And so that happened once, and then it happened again, and I said, okay, let me do something about this because I'm not about to keep getting 1-star reviews. And so one of the ladies who left a review, I just was taking a look, and you can actually see what they rate other stuff as, so like other products they've reviewed, and she left pretty bad reviews for everything that she bought. And so I said, okay, this is a her thing. This is not a me thing. And that's fine. And you're going to have that. So I said, okay, I'm going to let that go. Then the other person who left a 1-star review actually ended up finding me and reaching out to me. And this speaks to the power of email marketing, because I had a lead magnet in my book that she had downloaded, and she ended up emailing me, and then emailing me something that was like scam or something like that. And so I said, oh, this must be the lady who left that review, because Amazon doesn't tell you who is leaving the review. There's no way to contact them for whatever reason. And so I responded to the email and said, hey, did you happen to leave a review on Amazon? No, I'm sorry, I didn't even say that. I said, is there something I can help you with? Like, just because I just wanted to be helpful. And so then she went into her tirade of, I thought this was going to include XYZ and it did not. And so like, I'm so disappointed, da, da, da. And so basically she couldn't find the recipes that were included as the bonus for the book. She thought they were going to be in the book. However, for my devotional, I put them on a bonus website. And so with that, she didn't see where they were. So I did a quick little video with screenshots and pointed and said, hey, they're right here. You have them. Let me know if you need direct links or anything like that. And then after really probably one or two emails, she was like, oh my gosh, like, I'm so sorry, I'm going to delete the review. I didn't ask her to delete the review, but that was her choice. And she was explaining some other frustrations that were happening. And so it wasn't me, but basically I was the result of that. And so had I not read that review, I wouldn't have even known that was connected. And then also, had I not had email marketing in place, then she may not have been able to reach out to me, or she may not have reached out to me. She may have just been angry about it and left that 1-star review. Now, at this point, that book has over 250 reviews now, and I barely read them, but I just happened to be checking in on them. And so, say all that to say, when it comes to reviews, it's helpful to read your reviews because you will notice trends, you'll notice similarities, you'll notice things that poke out. And as a result of that, I ended up releasing a cookbook because I wanted to have something else so that people would not keep saying this is not a cookbook. And it wasn't a ton of people, it was like 2 or 3. But I wanted to have something else that's an option. And so now I can sell those together. I can direct people and refer to it inside of each other's A+ content. So on the devotional page, I have a picture of the cookbook. On the cookbook page, I have a picture of the devotional. So now I have some intermarketability that is working on my behalf because I took time to read the reviews. And so, say all that to say, here's some additional considerations you want to have when getting people to leave reviews. So with your A+ content, those are the additional pictures that you can add into your listing, or additional sections you can add into your Amazon listing. Do you have more than just pictures? Are you just repeating the picture of the book? Do you have a picture of yourself? Do you have different details that are inside of the book in terms of like the comparison options, if you have a series or books that are similar? And are these things going to stop the scroll? Because really that's your goal, is to stop readers on their tracks while they're scrolling to see if your book is a good fit. And then going back to that professional editing. So if your book is professionally edited, it's a lot easier for people to process, and it's a lot easier for them to recommend it. Same thing as we mentioned earlier as well, to make sure that it's something that's easy to read and easy to digest, meaning that you're writing it on the level of the reader so that they can understand it without giving themselves a headache or being overly tired trying to comprehend what it is you're talking about. And so that also looks like being relatable, sharing stories with them that they would find relevant, and then giving examples, because people are able to understand things better and able to kind of latch onto them when they have a specific example that they can use. And if your book makes sense to include these, including charts or graphics are helpful as well, because then they can say, oh, I remember on page XYZ, there was a visual that was there, and it really helped me to understand this concept. Thinking about just like when you were in school, your textbooks didn't just have straight text. They had visuals throughout, and it was something that would help you to be able to better understand, give your brain a little bit of a break, but also tap into a different side of your mind to be able to process things. And so having a really well-designed and really well-formatted book is important, because you don't want your book to look like you just threw it together or like it looks self-published. I know that's like the kiss of death in Indian self-publishing, is that you don't want your book to look self-published. You don't want it to look like homemade. You want it to look professional, and you want it to be able to compete with other people who are publishing. And so making sure you're not cutting corners, and really asking yourself if it makes sense for you to do things such as formatting your book yourself. I don't recommend it because of just the potential for mistakes and errors, and as well as you have a business to focus on, you have speeches to give, you have services to provide. And so when you are tapping out of your zone of genius and focusing on things that are ones you're not going to use consistently, then it means that you are more likely to make mistakes, and also you are not focusing on what you do best. And so also considering what makes your book different than other books in your genre. And this is something you can find in reviews of other books. Of course, you don't want to copy, you don't want to just try to be like them, but you want to see, okay, I notice these patterns. What kind of things stand out to me? What kind of things can I do that are different? And now Amazon has a great feature in the review section to show you what are some of the things that are similar about the review. So like 500 people said this, or this number of people said this. And so it really helps to make that process a little faster. And then lastly, are you actually asking people to leave a review inside your book? So I like to add a page inside of the books that I publish for myself or clients that asks them for a review, because it's okay to ask people for what you need. I'm not sure where in the author community we have decided that, and let me not say we, because I don't agree with this, but I'm not sure where in the author space where it just seems like, oh, I shouldn't ask for reviews, or I'm scared to ask for a review. Asking for one inside of your book is one of the easiest ways to ask for a review, and also one of the least pressured ways, because you don't control whether or not that person sees that page. And also, you are not there when you're asking them. So you should ask for a review inside your book. Have a dedicated page for it, or somewhere in there, whether it's at the end or asking throughout. I've even seen books where it asks for a review like every couple of chapters. I think that can be a little bit excessive, but if it works, it works. And so having that review in there is really helpful, because people are able to do it in the moment, as opposed to waiting until months until after you randomly see them again or randomly catch up with them again. It's like its own thing that fulfills itself, because it's going to happen when they get to that page. All right, so your biggest takeaway for today is that it's really important to embed your marketing into your book. And all of these are really different types of marketing. I know I've said they're publishing, but they are also types of marketing. And so really embedding those in your publishing process to make your book marketable, because really that's what it is. When people are reading your book, they're reading it because somebody marketed it to them. When people recommend your book, it's because they are now kind of transferring that marketing for you. And then same thing for reviewing. They are sharing their experience with the way in which you marketed your book. And so if this is something you need support with, then I encourage you to check out my Profitable Publishing Partner Service. And this is where I use these processes that I mentioned and more to support you to write, publish, and launch a profitable book that readers will read, recommend, and review, so that you can build your brand, attract more clients, and increase your sales. So today, the 3 ways that we talked about doing this is to get people to read your book so that they actually finish what it is that you wrote, and then getting people to recommend your book so that your book starts to market itself, which is a beautiful thing, and then make your book in a way that people are already excited to leave a review. So thank you again for listening to today's episode, and as always, stay profitable.